And possibly one of the greatest reasons SharePoint projects fail is due to a lack of adoption planning. Once, rather naively, this was assumed. You would put in place these amazing SharePoint solutions that solved every single issue your users had, and they would just gravitate towards it, use it, love it. However, in reality, the more advanced SharePoint has become, the more unfeasible this statement is. So how do you encourage adoption? One of the best ways to encourage adoption of your SharePoint project is to focus on the killer app. In other words, the micro applications or web parts that everyone uses. It encourages traffic, it encourages people to visit. Some examples that we've used in the past, worked for a large organisation in a single building, and they had a cafeteria in the bottom of their building. And they put up a lunch and a menu order system that was dynamic. Instead of people going down and finding out what was going on that day, they would go every single day to the intranet homepage to see what was happening. Another very powerful way is to have dynamic feeds or fresh content. So user-defined or aggregated feeds from something like NewsGator. Another great killer app is to have a classified type application. So your buy, sell, or recommendations on books or movies. Another one that's proved very successful is to have a phone directory. And not only can that integrate very tightly with the profile information in SharePoint, but it allows you to find skills of people in your organisation, but also things such as their hobbies and interests. It's particularly also useful when you're starting an organisation as a new employee. You can search for people in your business unit, or you can find out or try and remember the names of people that are sitting beside you. Another killer app would be an acronym or a wiki finder. A client of ours, Cancer Council New South Wales, has a plethora of industry-specific and organisational acronyms. And one of the most useful things we found when we put it in place was the wiki finder. People were going online onto their intranet to actually find what the meaning was behind a specific organisational acronym. And the final killer app would be to include things like birthday or milestone lists. So celebrate people's service achievements, or know potentially when you're getting cake. Assessment and training is another great adoption technique. So training on how to use the system is obviously a no-brainer. Whilst SharePoint is relatively straightforward to use, the more you explore the features to deliver the best results, the higher the chance user training is actually going to be required. I see this split into a couple of different types of training. You have your informal sort of lunch and learn or brown bag sessions. You bring your lunch and you knock through some concepts. This technique attracts people to events designed for like user-orientated learning. The second way would be through formal training. And at PA, we frequently deliver the train-the-trainer type training. So we assist internal training teams to create and deliver targeted training material, and it's been a very successful approach. Marketing and branding is another adoption technique. The marketing message should consist of several key adoption processes. It's also important to consider who you're actually targeting your marketing drive at. So power users, for example, they need different information than a simple end user may. But particularly when launching or relaunching an intranet, the branding can be useful to positively detract from the previous environment. And the same goes for naming. Don't call it SharePoint. Get people personifying the system. Call it Steve. And if heaven forbid it goes poorly, rebrand it in Pastel and name it Mandy. Once you're up and running, don't let go of the user's hands. Ongoing support is a very important technique. Ways to implement this would be to put SharePoint help on SharePoint. Use the SharePoint site itself to support users. Use the Learning and Productivity Kit. It's a simple download. You can deploy it out to your environment, and users can self-service. You also want to prepare support teams. So obviously these should be defined in your governance plan, but make sure help desks and customization teams are available and trained in advance to minimize the risk of failing to meet the rising expectations. And another third and final technique for ongoing support would be to define self-service support or community. So companies have had success using discussion blogs and wikis, help tech sheets or one-page tips and tricks, written and distributed, and put in that site or put through the help desk reply. Having a launch event is a great way to generate user adoption. Many organisations have scheduled big launch events with good success. It's usually a breakfast event in the morning, sometimes it's a lunch, but in conjunction with these events you can offer further training. You have contests, prizes, have page scavenger hunts. You can also have public awards for the users that take the adoption on at the event, and you can also do things like giveaways, branded coffee cups, mouse pads, flip cards with tips, and other helpful information. And last but not least, communication adoption strategies. Have service level agreements or department pacts. Simply put, it's really bribery to encourage movements to SharePoint away from the more costly legacy technology. Put your new site as a homepage. But be aware that if the homepage is enough of a gateway, they need the information. So performance and site design can become critical if you're forcing users to the site. And remember, above all else, the content is king. So do not force your users to a dead end or to something that's updated once every 2 years. So we've covered the factors that enhance adoption and the techniques to put in place. So what factors can negatively affect the adoption of a system? Having a solution that is so severely governed you cannot actually interact with it, it's obviously a pretty serious adoption roadblock. As mentioned earlier, focus on effective governance. The balance can be had, although it's always a fine line. Poor executive or stakeholder sponsorship is another serious disabler. There's nothing more poisonous than a senior stakeholder stating that they don't know why they're doing this, or perhaps we should just go back to the old way of doing things. You need to take a step back and question why the user feels that way and look to ensure that they are seeing the value in the solution for them. As Charles Kettering said, people are very open-minded about new things as long as they're exactly like the old one. So keep that in mind when you're dealing with your stakeholders. Having a SharePoint solution with a saturation of information, so much so it's almost impossible to find what you're looking for, is obviously as bad as having information on the site that's completely redundant. Use intelligent planning and navigation systems to ensure that the information is easy to locate and ensure it's kept up to date. And you can do this by either increasing visibility of review dates and or ownership. And finally, and this is pretty much the opposite of over-governing a site, by not having clearly defined style or content guidelines, your users can potentially create a very visually unappealing user experience. While some may believe that delightful lime green size 46 Comic Sans font on a pink background looks delicious, others may not agree. And some final things to remember after go live. As you move from legacy systems, file shares, email, access databases, external line of business systems, make allowances. Be patient. Things will not happen overnight. And especially when you have users that are moving from the most powerful, flexible business application of all, Excel. Also remember to keep the content up to date. Try to keep it coming in user submitted. Have prizes or awards for the best user stories. And continue measuring. Pay particular attention to metrics such as usage or search logs, my site self-population, and even content growth trends. And for the 3 months after, continue your monitoring, repeat your rollout training, and reevaluate your SharePoint roadmap to see what has worked and what hasn't.